The world was cold. The air was bitter and sharp, like ice cutting through every inch of skin. It was a barren land, where the sky had never been warm, and the ground felt like it had frozen into stone. The wind howled like a wild beast, carrying with it the cruel cold of the endless night. There was no shelter here, no safe place to rest. The world didn't care about the aliens who lived on it, Sina. An alien mother struggled to walk across the snow-covered ground. Her feet were bare, and the cold seemed to burn her skin with each step. The air around her was thin, and every breath felt like it could be her last. Her young daughter Lyra walked beside her, her small hands wrapped tightly around her mother's arm. Lyra's face was pale, her lips chapped, and her eyes were clouded with exhaustion. "Mom, I'm cold," Lyra whispered, her voice barely reaching Sina through the howling wind. "I know, my sweet one," Sina whispered back, her heart breaking at the sound of her daughter's voice. "We're almost there." But Sina didn't know if there even existed. She was lost, hopeless, with no way to warm herself or her daughter. They had been walking for what felt like days, with no sign of help or warmth. The world around them seemed so empty, so cold. The only thing that mattered now was finding food, finding warmth, something to help them survive. The two of them had come from a distant planet, a place filled with strife and hunger. They had run, left behind everything they knew, in search of a better life. They had heard rumors of a place where humans lived, a place where they might find food and warmth. But Sina never imagined it would be this hard. Her feet, once strong and steady, now felt numb. The snow crunched under her weight, but with every step she could feel herself slowing down. She glanced down at Lyra, who was shivering in her thin clothing, and knew they could not survive much longer. She was a mother, and her first instinct was to protect her child. But she had no strength left. Finally, after what felt like hours of walking, they reached a settlement. It was small, made up of buildings that rose from the snow like dark shadows against the gray sky. Smoke curled from chimneys, and there was a faint glow of light coming from inside the buildings.
Ow.
It was the warmth they had been longing for. Sina's heart raced. Could they have finally found what they needed? Could humans offer them the help they so desperately needed? But as she approached the settlement, she hesitated. She had heard stories about how humans viewed aliens. They weren't always kind. Would they welcome her and her daughter, or would they turn them away? "Please," Sina whispered to herself, looking down at Lyra. "We need help." With trembling hands, Sina took her daughter's hand and led her toward the nearest building. It was a small food stand, with a human man standing behind it. He was busy with a few other customers, but when he saw Sina and Lyra, his eyes widened. His gaze moved from their bare feet to their pale faces, and for a moment, it seemed as if he didn't know what to say. Sina felt the heat of embarrassment rise in her chest. She looked down at herself and Lyra, both of them covered in dirt and snow, their clothing barely holding together. They were alien, and they were poor. She didn't belong here, not among these humans who seemed so strong, so warm, so full of life. But the man didn't turn away. Instead, he stepped forward. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft and filled with concern. Sina hesitated. She opened her mouth to speak, but her throat was too dry. She hadn't eaten in days. Strength was gone, and she knew that any word she tried to speak might break the little control she had left. She could only nod, hoping that he would. "Understand, please," she said in a soft voice. "We just want a warm meal, please." Her voice cracked, and the man's eyes softened. He looked down at them, and then behind him at the warm food he had prepared for the other customers. He seemed to be thinking, deciding what to do. Then, without saying another word, he reached down and grabbed 2 warm portions of food. He handed one to Sina and the other to Lyra, who took it eagerly, her hands shaking as she held the meal. Sina's heart swelled with gratitude. Didn't know if she had ever felt this kind of relief before. The warmth from the food was comforting, and she could feel the coldness in her body start to fade. The hunger she had been holding inside for so long was finally being satisfied. The man smiled at them. "You're welcome," he said, his voice kind. You two look like you've been through a lot. Don't worry about paying. Just take care of yourselves." Sina couldn't speak. The tears she had been holding back began to fall, but she didn't care. She had found kindness, something she had almost given up hope on. The human man had given her and her daughter a warm meal, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed that they might be okay as they sat down on the cold ground. Eating their meal in silence, Sina realized something. No matter how cold the world was, no matter how desperate they had become, there was still kindness out there. Maybe humans weren't so different from her own kind after all. Sina and Lyra sat on the cold ground, their hands wrapped around the warm food. The warmth from the meal slowly spread through their bodies, giving them the strength they so desperately needed. The heat from the food was a comfort, but the kindness from the human man felt like something much bigger, something they hadn't expected. Sina watched her daughter eat. Lyra's small hand shook as she held the meal, but with every bite, her face seemed to brighten. She smiled, the first real smile Sina had seen in days. It was the kind of smile that melted away all the worry, the fear, and the sadness. Tina felt her own heart lighten as she watched her daughter. It was the first time in so long that she had seen a spark of hope in Lyra's eyes. Sina took a deep breath. The food was good, but it wasn't just the food that had made a difference. It was the kindness of the human man. He had given them something without asking for anything in return. That was rare, and it made Sina wonder. Why had he helped them? Was it just out of kindness, or was there something more to it? She glanced at the man as he returned to his food stand, serving other customers with a calm and steady hand. He didn't seem to be bothered by their presence. He didn't seem afraid of them, even though they were strangers. Sina wondered if other humans would be so kind, or if this man was different. Lyra finished her meal quickly, looking up at Sina with wide eyes. "Mom, that food was so good," she said softly, her voice still small, but filled with gratitude. "No, my sweet one," Sina replied, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I'm glad you liked it." The warmth from the food had spread through their bodies, but now Sina's thoughts turned to the bigger question. What were they going to do next? They couldn't stay in the cold, in this unfamiliar world forever. They needed to find shelter, a safe place where they could rest and recover. But how? They had no money, no way of paying for a place to stay. They were aliens, and this was a human world. Would they be turned away again, as they had been in other places? Sina felt a knot of worry form in her chest, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't let herself give in to fear, not now, not after everything they had been through. As if reading her thoughts, the human man looked up from his stand and approached them. He walked over slowly, cautiously, but with no sign of fear. Sina stood up, instinctively moving in front of Lyra to protect her. The man paused when he saw this, his expression softening. He could see the worry in Sina's eyes. But he didn't look afraid. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need," the man said, his voice gentle. "If you need a place to sleep, there's a small shelter nearby. It's warm and it's free. You don't have to worry about anything." Sina's heart skipped a beat. Was he serious? She had expected him to tell them to leave, to send them back into the cold. But instead, he was offering them shelter. For free. Her mind raced. Was this just a kindness for the moment? Would things change once they stayed longer? Would he want something in return later? But the kindness in his eyes told her that he wasn't expecting anything. He was simply offering them a place to rest. "I don't know how to thank you," Sina said, her voice shaking. She didn't know how to explain how much this meant to her, how much it meant to Lyra. She felt a tear fall down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, not wanting to show weakness. She had to stay strong for her daughter. "You don't have to thank me," the man said with a smile. "I'm just doing what's right. You and your daughter can rest here for as long as you need." Sina's heart swelled with emotion. She had been so sure that humans would never be kind to them. They were outsiders, strangers. But this man, this human, had done something she hadn't expected. He had shown them kindness when they had nothing to offer in return. It made her believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them here. "Thank you, Sina," whispered, looking down at Lyra. "We will take your offer." The man smiled again. "It's the least I can do," he said, turning back toward the food stand. "The shelter's just down the road. It's warm inside, and there are blankets. You can rest there." Sina nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. For the first time in days, she felt a small spark of hope. They weren't alone. Someone cared. She looked down at Lyra, who was still smiling as she finished the last bite of her meal. "Let's go, Lyra," Sina said softly. "Let's go to the shelter." Together, they followed the man's directions down the road, their feet still cold, but their hearts a little warmer. The shelter was small, but it was a place to rest, a place to feel safe. The door creaked open, and inside, they found blankets and warmth. Sina and Lyra both sat down, the comfort of the shelter surrounding them. Sina's mind raced with thoughts. Of the future, there was still so much uncertainty. But for now, they had a chance. They had been given kindness when they needed it the most. As Lyra lay down on the blanket, her eyes fluttered closed, a peaceful expression on her face. Sina watched her for a moment, then looked out the small window, her thoughts turning to the human man who had helped them. She had come to this world thinking humans would be their enemies. But now, she wasn't so sure. The night passed quietly, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, Sina and Lyra slept soundly. The warmth of the shelter wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. And the feeling of safety was something Sina hadn't dared to dream of in a long time. As she awoke, she glanced over at Lyra, who was still asleep. Her face peaceful and free from the worry that had plagued her for so long. Sina sat up, her body stiff from the cold that still clung to her bones despite the warmth of the shelter. She looked around at the small room bare, but enough for them to rest. It was a simple space, with a few blankets on the floor and a small stove in the corner, gently crackling with the fire that provided the heat. For a moment, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to imagine a world where they could stay here forever. A world where they didn't have to be afraid. But then the weight of their situation came crashing back. This was only temporary. Humans were kind, yes, but could they truly trust them? Could they really settle here, or would they eventually be forced to leave, to run again? Sina's mind raced with questions, each one more frightening than the last. What if this was just a moment of kindness, nothing more than a temporary shelter for the cold night? Then once they knew more about who they were, about what they had left behind, would they accept them, or would they push them out, like everyone else? Sina couldn't help but wonder. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. "Mom." Sina turned to see Lyra, her eyes blinking sleepily as she sat up. Rubbing her small eyes, the child's innocent gaze was filled with questions that Sina wasn't ready to answer. She didn't want to share her worries with Lyra, not yet. She needed to protect her from that burden for a little longer. "Good morning, Lyra," Sina said gently, forcing a smile. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra nodded, though her face was still tired. "I feel better now, Mom. The blankets were warm." Sina reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. She could see the relief in Lyra's eyes, a sign that the warmth and food had done wonders for her health. But the fear lingered in Sina's heart. They couldn't stay here forever. The reality of their situation was still the same. They were strangers in a strange land. They had no home, no real place to belong. The world outside had not changed, and neither had the past they had left behind. "I'm glad you feel better, my sweet one," Sina said softly, her voice shaking just a little. "But we can't stay here forever. We need to keep moving." Lyra's expression changed, her eyes clouding with confusion. "But Mom, the man, he said we could stay, said we're safe here." Sina sighed, her heart aching at her daughter's innocence. She didn't want to crush Lyra's hope, but the truth had to be faced. Nothing in this world was guaranteed. They couldn't just take kindness for granted, especially when they didn't know what might come next. "He was kind, Lyra," Sina explained carefully. "But we can't always depend on kindness. We need to be ready to move if we need to. I don't want to put us in danger." Lyra was quiet for a moment, her small face thoughtful. "But what if we can trust him? What if he wants to help us? For real?" Sina's heart twisted at the question. She had to be careful, not just for her sake, but for Lyra's. Trust was a fragile thing, especially when they had been betrayed so many times before. But Lyra's words made her pause. What if they could trust this human? What if there was a chance for them here in this cold and lonely world? Sina didn't know the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't bear to see her daughter suffer anymore. She had to give this a chance, even if it meant risking her own heart. Before she could say anything more, there was a knock on the shelter door. Sina's heart skipped a beat. She quickly got to her feet and motioned for Lyra to stay behind her. The door creaked open, and the human man from the food stand entered. He was holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth, his face kind but serious. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "I thought I'd bring you something to eat just in case you were hungry." Sina blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that. We'd have some food left." The man smiled and shook his head. "No, you need more. It's the least I can do." He stepped inside, setting the bundle down on the floor. "And I have a few things to ask you. I know you and your daughter are strangers here, and I want to help, but I need to know more. I need to understand what you're running from. I won't judge you, but I need to understand." Sina felt a knot form in her stomach. She had expected kindness, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to be asked to explain everything, to share their story. It was too soon. She wasn't ready. But the man seemed genuine, wasn't asking for anything in return. And if they were going to stay here, they had to trust him eventually. She took a deep breath. "We're from a distant world. We had to leave because it was no longer safe. Our people turned on us. We're fugitives." The man nodded, listening carefully. "I see." Sina's hands shook slightly as she spoke, but she continued. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We just need a place to rest, to recover." "Understand," the man said, his voice gentle. "You're welcome here for as long as you need. I'll do what I can to help." Sina hesitated, then nodded, her heart heavy with doubt but filled with a small spark of hope. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her and Lyra to find peace. The days that followed were filled with quiet peace, a peace Sina and Lyra hadn't known for a long time. The human man, whose name they had learned was Daniel, continued to offer them kindness. Every morning, he would bring them food, fresh and warm, and every night, he made sure they had a safe place to sleep. The shelter was small, but it was enough. It was more than enough. Sina had never thought she would find something like this. She had never thought humans would be so kind, so generous. Her world, her people, had taught her to be cautious, to trust no one. But here, in this strange place, she found herself slowly letting go of the fear that had held her for so long. Each day, she and Lyra spent more time with Daniel. They didn't speak much about their past. Sina wasn't ready for that, but they spent time together, learning about each other. Lyra played with Daniel's younger sister, who came to visit every day, and Sina helped Daniel with small tasks, things that made the day pass a little easier. She felt herself growing stronger, both physically and mentally. The warmth, the food, the safety was a gift. But the more she thought about it, the more questions filled her mind. Why was Daniel helping them? Was it just kindness, or was there something else? One evening, as they sat around a small table, sharing a meal, Sina finally found the courage to ask. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft, "why are you helping us? You barely know us. We're strangers. We have nothing to offer you in return. So why are you doing this?" Daniel paused, his hand still on the bowl of food. He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, Sina saw something in his eyes, something deeper than kindness. It was understanding, a quiet recognition of their pain. "I've seen a lot of suffering in my life," Daniel said slowly. "I've seen people who've lost everything, just like you and your daughter. I know what it's like to feel like there's no hope. So when I see someone who needs help, I don't turn away. I can't. I'm just doing what anyone would do." Sina's heart tightened. His words weren't just empty promises. He spoke with a depth of experience that she couldn't ignore. She had been afraid to trust, but now, in this moment, she understood that trust was the only way forward. "You don't have to explain," she said quietly. I don't want to put you in danger. I don't want to cause trouble for you or your people." Daniel shook his head. "You're not causing any trouble. You and Lyra are welcome here. I'll do whatever I can to make sure you're safe. No one will harm you while you're under my roof." Sina felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The fear that had been with her for so long, the fear that had kept her from trusting anyone, began to fade. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a place where they could rest, a place where they could heal. That night, as they lay in their blankets, Lyra's soft breathing filling the air, Sina thought about their journey. She thought about everything they had left behind, the home they had once known, the people they had trusted, and the lives they had lost. But now, she also thought about the future. A future that felt uncertain, but not hopeless. For the first time in so long, she allowed herself to dream, to imagine a life where she and Lyra could stay. In one place, where they didn't have to run or hide anymore. Where they could build a home, a family, and maybe, just maybe, a new life. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Sina and Lyra grew stronger. They helped Daniel with his food stand, learning new things about the world they now found themselves in. They met new people, all of whom were kind, just like Daniel. They heard stories about the world, about humans, and about the struggles they had faced, just as the aliens had. They were all survivors in their own way. One afternoon, as they sat outside the shelter, Lyra turned to Sina with wide eyes. "Mom, look," she said, pointing toward the horizon. Sina followed her daughter's finger and saw something amazing. The sky was filled with bright colors, pink, orange, and purples. The sun began to set. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest swell with emotion. It was something she had never seen before, a sight that was so simple yet so full of wonder. "It's beautiful," Sina whispered, her voice filled with awe. Lyra smiled, her face glowing with happiness. "It's so pretty, Mom," Sina nodded, feeling the warmth of the moment. For the first time in so long, she felt at peace. She looked at Lyra, her heart full of love and hope. "I never thought I'd see something like this," Sina said softly. "But I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're together." Lyra leaned her head against Sina's shoulder. "Me too, Mom. I'm really happy here." As the last rays of the sun faded behind the horizon, Sina felt a small spark of hope light up in her heart. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, they had found a place where they could belong. Sina had learned to appreciate the small moments of peace. The shelter was warm, and every day felt like a gift. For the first time, in what seemed like forever, they weren't running. They weren't hiding. She had started to think that maybe, just maybe, they could build a life here. Maybe this world could offer them something more than cold and fear. But even in a place that felt safe, old habits die hard. Sina still couldn't fully shake the fear of being found, of being chased again. She told herself that she had to stay, alert that she couldn't let her guard down completely. She had to protect Lyra. That was her duty as a mother. One quiet afternoon, Daniel came by, his usual smile on his face. He was carrying a bundle of food as he always did, and the scent of warm bread and stew filled the air. "I brought more food for you too," he said cheerfully, setting the bundle down in front of them. Sina smiled, grateful for the warmth he continued to offer. "Thank you, Daniel. You've been so kind to us." Daniel looked at her, his expression soft. "I told you, you don't have to thank me. You're welcome here." Sina nodded, still feeling a little uncertain, but also filled with relief. They had found kindness, something she had never expected, something she had almost given up on. But just as she was about to speak, something shifted in the air. Out there was a change in the wind, something in the atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Senna's heart began to race as she looked around, her eyes narrowing. Something wasn't right. Suddenly a loud noise broke the calm metallic. Footsteps crunching against the snow. She froze. It was the sound of boots. Heavy boots. Coming closer. Before she could react, the door to the shelter swung open. Sina instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, her arms spread wide to shield her daughter. Daniel, too, turned quickly, his hand moving toward the door as if to block whoever was coming inside. A group of alien soldiers stood in the doorway, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. Sina's blood ran cold. These were the soldiers who had been hunting her. She hadn't seen them in weeks, but she knew them. She knew their kind, and she knew what they were capable of. "Where are they?" one of the soldiers demanded, his voice harsh and cold. His eyes scanned the room, stopping on Sina and Lyra. "We've been tracking you." Sina's heart pounded in her chest. The soldiers had found them. She had hoped they would be left alone, but her worst fears were now real. They were here. They had tracked her down, and they weren't going to stop. She stepped forward, trying to stay calm, trying not to let the panic show in her voice. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling despite her best. "Efforts to control it." "Don't lie," the soldier growled, stepping closer. "We know you've been hiding here. We know you've been with humans. You're a fugitive, and you'll come with us." Daniel stepped forward, standing between the soldiers and Sina. His posture was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. He wasn't going to let them take Sina or Lyra without a fight. "You're not taking them," he said, his voice firm. "They're not going anywhere." The soldiers exchanged a look. One of them stepped forward, raising his hand in a gesture of warning. "Stay out of this, human," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "This doesn't concern you." But Daniel didn't move. "It concerns me now," he said quietly. "I'm not letting them go." Sina felt her heart race. Weren't just after her anymore. They were after the man who had shown her kindness. They were willing to harm him just because he had helped her and Lyra. "You don't understand," Sina said, her voice now louder, more desperate. "I can't go with you. I've already lost everything. Please, let us stay here." The soldier paused, clearly irritated by the human's defiance. "You have no choice," he said, raising his weapon. "Move aside." But before the soldier could make another move, Daniel stepped forward, blocking the door with his body. "I won't let you take them," he repeated. "Not while I'm here." The soldiers looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, the leader spoke again. "This is your last warning. Step aside, or we will make you." Sina's heart dropped. She had never wanted to cause trouble for anyone, especially not Daniel, who had done nothing but help them. But now, her choices were running out. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She could feel the weight of the past pushing against her, the years of running and hiding, the fear that had always held her back. But she couldn't let Lyra see this anymore. She couldn't let her daughter grow up afraid. "No," Sina said firmly, stepping forward. "I won't let you hurt him. I won't let you take us." The soldiers hesitated, clearly not expecting such a strong response from her. They looked to their leader, who stood silently for a long moment. Finally he spoke. "We'll give you one chance to leave with us. Refuse, and we will take you by force." Sina's heart raced, her thoughts flying. She looked at Daniel, who met her gaze with determination in his eyes. He wasn't afraid. He was willing to fight for them. She wasn't going to let anyone take him down without a fight. "I won't go," Sina said quietly, but firmly. The soldiers stood still for a moment, then began to move toward her. But before they could reach her, a loud voice stopped them. "Enough." It was Daniel's voice, raised in a commanding tone. The soldiers paused, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. The silence that followed Daniel's command felt heavy, as if the very air between them had thickened with tension. The soldiers, their eyes narrowed, and their bodies still, stared at Daniel. Sina stood, her heart pounding in her chest, as she watched the scene unfold. She had no idea what would happen next. The fear that had been buried deep inside her began to creep back, but she refused to let it control her. She had already come so far. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "You are making a mistake, human," he said coldly. "This is not your fight. You have no idea who you are dealing with." But Daniel didn't flinch. His posture remained strong, and his eyes stayed locked on the soldiers. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm not backing down. You're not taking them." The soldiers exchanged glances. clearly trying to assess the situation. Sina could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had come here to capture her and her daughter, but now, faced with a human who refused to back down, they were unsure of what to do. "I will not ask again," the leader said, his voice lower this time, but still filled with authority. "You will step aside, or we will take action." Daniel's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't step back. "I said no," he repeated, his voice unyielding. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, no one moved, and the only sound was the crackling of the fire in the corner of the room. Then, unexpectedly, the leader of the soldiers let out a long sigh and stepped back. "Very well," he said, his voice softer now. "But know this, human, there will be consequences. You cannot protect them forever." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The soldiers turned and left the shelter, their footsteps growing fainter as they walked away. Sina stood there in shock, unsure of what had just happened. She had expected a fight, a struggle, but the soldiers had backed down. They had left without a word. As the door shut behind them, Daniel turned toward Sina, his expression calm but tired. "They won't come back. It's not for a while," he said, as if trying to reassure her. "But we need to be careful. I'll keep looking for you." Sina nodded, still trying to process everything. I don't understand. Why did they leave?" Daniel walked over to the table, his movements slow. "They were trying to intimidate me. They thought I'd back down. But I wasn't going to let them take you. I knew if I stood firm, they'd see I wasn't afraid." Sina felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Daniel had risked everything for her and Lyra. He hadn't backed down. He hadn't turned away when things got hard. And in that moment, Sina realized just how much she had come to trust him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved us. I don't know how to repay you." Daniel gave her a small smile, though it was tired. "You don't need to repay me? We're all in this together." Sina nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She had feared they would be turned away again, that they would have to run once more. But now, for the first time in so long, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. For the rest of the evening, they sat together in the warmth of the shelter, the quiet crackling of the fire, the only sound between them. Lyra had fallen asleep, her small form curled up under the blankets, her face peaceful and calm. Sina watched her daughter, her heart full of love and protection. She had promised herself that she would do everything in her power to keep Lyra safe. She had failed once, but she wouldn't fail again. Daniel sat across from her, his face thoughtful. "You're not alone, Sina," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm here. I'll help you as long as you need it." Sina felt a lump form in her throat. "But what if they come back?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What if they bring more soldiers? I can't let them hurt you. You've already done so much for us." Daniel's expression softened. "I'm not afraid of them," he said. "I'll protect you both. I promise." Sina didn't know how much longer they could stay hidden in the shelter. She didn't know how long the soldiers would leave them in peace. But for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to think about the future where she didn't have to run, a future where she could keep Lyra safe, a future where they didn't have to hide anymore. "Thank you," Sina said again, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." Daniel smiled gently. "You're welcome. Glad I could help." As the night wore on, Sina felt a deep sense of peace. They had been through so much pain, so much fear, but now, with Daniel's help, they had a chance to rebuild, a chance to start over. For the first time, Sina truly believed that. Maybe, just maybe, this could be their home. And no matter what challenges they faced in the future, they would face them together.